Cole Rush, we are here for another late screening of a movie that I absolutely adore, and I saw multiple times in the theaters when it came out 25 years ago, almost exactly. It came out on Halloween 1997, which is kind of an odd, I guess, release date for Boogie Nights. I had not watched it in probably 10 years in its entirety before revisiting it for the show, and I have a newfound appreciation for it. It's also a lot more uncomfortable than it was when I was, 20 something, now watching it as a middle-aged man. But I'm dying to know what you thought of Boogie Nights. What did you know about this movie? What were your expectations, if any? And just broad strokes, what's your reaction? Because I want to know what the temperature of this conversation is going to be. But first, I need you to refresh me. You told me before we jumped on, what's your porn name? What's
Chet
your
Jax.
Chet Jax?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah,
All right.
Chet is also the alter ego I pull out when I am with a lot of new people I don't know, particularly like really fratty guys, and I have to, kind of flip my extrovert switch on and engage with people who I'm not usually close with. So I figure why not make Chet Jax an extension of that. I'm sure my wife would not be thrilled about this new venture, but we can all be a little bit of Dirk Diggler in our heads, can't we?
We can. And I think I also appreciate the fact that you just used the words extension and the phrase pull out, just breezed right past them.
Yep. Well,
Um,
I had to think long and hard about what I was going to say, so.
Yikes.
But anyway,
It's gonna be
I
it's gonna be that kind of conversation, guys. Yeah.
oh, of course it is. I thought that Boogie Nights was the same thing as Saturday Night Fever. Um,
Going into it.
yeah,
Okay.
I have never seen Saturday Night Fever, so I just assumed it must be a movie about disco. Um, and the first 2 minutes really sold me on this idea. Um, I adore the soundtrack. We're actually recording this on my marriage anniversary with my wife, and we came out like, when they do the intros of the husband and wife, we came out to the song Best of My Love, and
Yeah.
that is the song that plays at the opening of this movie. So it felt very serendipitous to be watching it. The movie then derails into plenty of other territory that my wife and I may or may not be able to relate to. However, that was a special moment. So
Well,
um,
first of all, happy anniversary. It's weird because it's a weekday and I know you guys got married on a weekend and I was there with my
yep.
wife. It was a great day for all. So congratulations. Did you and the missus watch Boogie Nights together?
No, no. It was funny, actually. I don't think she knew anything about it, but as we've talked about many times on this show, I always offer her the option to watch whatever movie. And I go, oh, yeah, today I got to watch Boogie Nights. I had planned it for Monday. Some things came up, AKA I took an edible and played video games. And then I was like, oh, I'll watch it on Tuesday. And I was like, oh, yeah, we have to watch Boogie Nights tonight. And she goes, or you could watch it during the day, which is her way of saying I do not want to watch it. So she actually came in. She was about to leave for the grocery store right at a moment where there were lots of gunshots being fired. So she was very perplexed by the whole ordeal. Um, but
In the movie,
anyway,
you mean?
yeah. That is an important clarification. Yes. I liked the movie. I thought it was super interesting. I thought there were elements of camp to it. What I really appreciated about it the most was it kind of kicked off as this romanticization of the world of porn, especially in like the 70s. I don't know exactly when it's set, but something along those lines, I'm
It
sure.
starts in 77.
Right, because then they do the New Year's party and it's the 80s. So like um it all felt like a rose tinted version of kind of what this might be like. And then I appreciate that the movie, probably an hour and a half in, tonally shifts and shows
Mhm.
the dark side of it all. Um, this may not be a very apt comparison, but it reminds me a little bit of something like The Godfather, where you have this kind of really cool depictive sheen of like what the best of this sort of world would be like, and then they tear it all down in front of you. Um, and as an audience member slash viewer, I enjoy that kind of the rug being pulled from under me, narrative wise. It's like, oh, this is this, Fast and Furious world that's great for everybody. They're all having a lot of fun. And then suddenly, nope, there's a stark reality hidden behind the scenes here. And I enjoyed that immensely. I thought it was really cool. I wouldn't say I came out of the movie like I have to watch this again, but it was just like an unexpected surprise. I thought there were some really interesting tidbits in there. The cast, holy guacamole, is the cast immaculate, and they all just put forth these stellar performances. Don Cheadle, are you kidding me? I was like, this is amazing. So I just had a ton of fun. I watched the first 48 minutes on my treadmill, which gets me 2 miles in. And then I watched the rest on my big screen TV as it was probably meant to be viewed. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun watching it. I think Mark Wahlberg is a very interesting actor. I like every time I watch something and I know he's in it, I'm kind of like meh. And then I watch it and I'm like, no, he deserves this. Like he does a pretty good job. So yeah, I don't know. It was so much fun. That's the best way I can describe Boogie Nights.
Yeah, it's a generally fun movie, but I think I'd always had a problem with it in that, that last hour, because it's 2 hours and 35 minutes long, and I didn't have a stopwatch with me, but I would guess that your recollection of the tonal shift is just about right. You got the hour and a half
Yeah.
of, hey, it's the good times, but then it switches over into the 80s, and then it's the fall of the porn empire. I think the allusion to The Godfather is spot on, because if you think about that movie, even though going in it's about a crime family, they're doing, involved in shady business, they do present themselves first and foremost as a family. It opens with the wedding, everyone's
Right.
together, everybody's happy. Even when the kind of seedy underbelly of their dealings makes its way into the picture, I think it's been a little while since we watched Godfather, but I would say the horse's head in the director's bed was kind of like the big shock moment of like, hey,
Right.
these people mean business. But that violence did not, and that corruption did not affect the Corleone family. Much in the same way with Boogie Nights, there's a big pool party at Jack Horner, his house, played wonderfully by Burt Reynolds, and the Colonel shows up. He's the guy who puts all the money up, and he's also a huge pervert, as we find the depths to our horror later
Yeah.
on. He brings this like teeny bopper girl who's obsessed with cocaine, and she overdoses at the party, and he has one of his goons like get her out the back door, and she's bleeding and everything. But even that doesn't affect the good times. That's an undercurrent of sinister stuff
Yeah.
going on. But then in the 1980s, when everyone starts getting heavily into drugs and like absolute moral decay, then you start to see the family break apart, which is kind of what happens with The Godfather when people start getting picked off, like Sonny in the toll booth and all of that business. So yeah, that's spot on. I think Mark Wahlberg was wonderful in this movie. This film was the introduction to a lot of these great actors for me. John C. Riley, Don.
John C. Riley might be one of my all-time favorite actors. So seeing him in anything is just a treat. And I'm always reminded, also, sorry I interrupted. I just
No,
had to
no.
get in a John C. Riley note. I'm always so impressed with his range because he always kind of sounds and looks a little goofy, but his characters are different. They feel distinct. And it's like, yeah, I see him at first glance and I'm like, that is John C. Riley. But then he reels me back in. It's kind of like the Wahlberg effect.
Yeah, I mean, like if you think about him in this movie, and then him in Step Brothers, and then him in Chicago. Did you ever see him in Chicago?
I did see Chicago. I don't remember it very well because I didn't love the movie.
He sang that number, Mr. Cellophane, and it's just a very
Hmm.
sad, talk about range. It's like if you think John C. Riley, watch at least that clip of him, and you'll be instantly turned around. But yeah, Don Cheadle, as I mentioned, he was like, when I found out that he was going to be, replacing, he was going to be Rhodey in the Iron Man sequels, I was like, that's fantastic news, because I think my recollection was some people were like, "Who's Don Cheadle?" And I was like, "It's Buck Swope from Boogie Nights." I'm so excited. And let's see, Thomas Jane, who plays the I can never remember his name, but he's the guy with the mustache who shows up towards very end, who orchestrates the drug deal.
Todd
And
Parker.
Todd, yeah, Todd. He was great. Alfred
Also, there's
Molina.
Heather Graham and Julianne Moore are both exceptional.
Well, I want to finish this train of thought, because the Alfred Molina is the guy whose house that drug deal happens at. He's the dude who's, you know, obsessed with Sister Christian. He's got the little
Right.
kid lighting firecrackers. Did you recognize him?
I did not.
That's Dr. Octopus, sir, from the from the
Oh,
Spider-Man movies.
okay. You know, thinking back, I'm like, got it. Okay.
But there's like this weird Marvel Comics connection because John C. Reilly was in Guardians of the Galaxy. Don Cheadle, of course, was in Iron Man, Iron Man 2 and everything after. Thomas Jane was the Punisher in 2004, and Alfred Molina was Doc Ock. So this is like I would like to imagine somehow that this is part of the Spider-Man multiverse or Doctor Strange multiverse where all of this happened to
In No
our
Way
heroes.
Home, all those enemies that were coming in before they could stop it, they were all from Boogie Nights.
And that's why, if you listen closely, you can hear the best of my love happening, coming across those cracks in the sky. But yeah, you're right. Julianne Moore, this is the first time I'd seen her. I knew Heather Graham from a couple of movies, most notably License to Drive. So she was like a big childhood crush of mine. And to see her play Roller Girl, wow. But the great thing about this movie that was written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, who is one of my favorite directors, although I haven't seen everything of his. Like he came out with Mystic Pizza last year, which I still haven't caught up with. But he's got this great feeling for nostalgia that doesn't feel nostalgic in the way that we kind of know it today.
Yep.
It feels as if he was, you know, fully alive and cognizant in the 1970s and put all that stuff into a time capsule to create the movie version of it in 1997, instead of just trying to recollect, hey, what was, you know, kind of popular and cool back then? We'll put this, you know, thing in the background to show, hey, isn't this so kitsch?
Yep. I've actually been watching a ton of video essays recently, and I stumbled upon one about the title is Stranger Things and the Danger of Nostalgia. And you know how I feel about Stranger Things.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's ridiculous and stupid, and I'm glad that other people enjoy it, but that is how I feel about it.
That's it. That makes we're a club of
and
two, sir.
there we go. The entire thesis of the essay is about how nostalgia can be a very valuable tool in that it can remind us of both the good and the bad of a specific era. When it is used mindlessly as a sort of, as for lack of a better term, a drug, when it's only to remember some, again, rose-tinted version of a past that people want to reclaim, it is very dangerous within the pop culture zeitgeist. And there are many examples that the person cites. I'll send you the link afterwards, but it's just a phenomenal essay. It's really interesting. And naturally, I was thinking about this as I was watching this movie because, you know, for that first hour and a half, I was like, okay, this is a really cool kind of like depiction of a world I would have never really imagined before. And then when that second half of the movie kicks in, I thought, okay, they're using nostalgia in the right way. They're showing us that it's not all butterflies and rainbows and quite literally sex, right? It is more of a realistic depiction of a past that some people romanticize and want to reclaim, but that may not be worth it if you really dig a little bit deeper than whatever they show you on the surface. So, you know, if we're bucketing things into, there's one category where makes good use of nostalgia and is realistic in its approach, where the other hand, it's you know, nostalgia that is more of a drug than anything and serves no actual purpose. This one falls distinctly into the former, which to me is a very good thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you're saying about the kind of the surface level nostalgia versus the stuff that kind of covers up the truth, the good and the bad, because that's what we get with Mark Wahlberg's character Eddie Adams, who in the opening of the film he's a bus boy in a nightclub run by Luis Guzman, another great
Love
actor.
Luis Guzman.
I also have to mention before I forget Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yep.
You know, R.I.P. Because I knew I was in danger of forgetting him. But yeah, like you're right. This entire cast is spot on. There's not a dud in the bunch. Even some of the bit parts that I'm not familiar with the supporting players, they're all, you know, phenomenal. But so Eddie Adams is recognized by Burt Reynolds' character, Jack Horner, who's a producer and director of porn movies. And he essentially recruits Roller Girl to go check this kid out because he's heard things. And what he's heard essentially is he's got a gigantic penis and can ejaculate on command multiple times. So he recruits this 17-year-old kid. That's what Eddie claims he is. And I don't know if the message of the film is that he's lying or if he really is 17. But he kind of gets invited over to Jack's house. They go out to dinner and coffee with Roller Girl and with Amber Waves, who is Jack's sort of muse, I guess, the star of many of his films. Eddie and Roller Girl have sex. Next thing you know, Eddie's in motion pictures going under the name Dirk Diggler. And he meets up with John C. Reilly's character. They form a fast friendship that's also a competitive friendship, which is hilarious. They're always trying to one-up each other, but in that kind of subtle way. And as the movie goes on, Dirk becomes a rising star. He asks to not be referred to as Eddie anymore, but as Dirk. And he leaves his entire past behind. He's got, I guess, a girlfriend, or at least some kind of a relationship that, we see for one scene and then is passed over. He's got parents who hate each other and a mom who appears to hate him. He runs away from home essentially and right into Jack's arms/studio. But when the drug influence comes in, I don't think it's as a simplistic message as it's drugs that destroyed, Dirk's life. Although that is kind of the through line here. I feel like there's more going on because in the 80s, Amber Waves introduces Dirk to cocaine. And from then on, he's like cocaine, meth, anything he get his hands on. It wrecks his body, it wrecks his career and all of his relationships. But he is such a bright innocent at the beginning of this movie that you get to watch over this 2.5 hours, this trajectory that is entirely earned and very moving and funny and tragic and well-rounded at the end, because he does come out of it, but he's not the same kid as he was at the beginning. You see him get his confidence back and mend some of his relationships, but some of that darkness and ego is still very much there.
Right. It's as much a descent into drugs. I think his descent into drugs especially is more emblematic of, I think, the larger progression of the times. I wasn't around, but that's just my guess. And then I think that there's also a commentary on any form of fame or stardom. Another thing I appreciated about this movie is that, and this happens with Don Cheadle's character, the effect starring in adult films has on people when they try to quote unquote go straight, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with sex work of any form, quite frankly. There are things wrong, obviously, with the larger industry, but I think that it is a viable way to get by, right? So it's like seeing an honest depiction of a character who now wants to seek a loan and start a different line of business is kind of sad, because that is still very prevalent today. Whereas you then have Dirk/Eddie, who comes up and is a rising star, but you can only rise so far before you start to fall. And then Jack brings around this other pretty boy who's
Johnny
clearly,
Doe.
yeah, Johnny Doe, his next attempt. And then he has some name that's very similar to Burt Landers or whatever. I can't remember the name, but you also see him realize that he is not the end all be all. It's sort of a realization that he's a cog in the machine. And I think the drugs for him are part of that realization. Like, it is the machine feeding him a substance that he likes rather than the other way around, rather than the substance being something that can advance his career. It more or less ruins him. And it's kind of emblematic of, oh, I'm part of this much larger picture that I didn't really realize. Because when you're the focus, it's easy to think, I am the beginning, middle, and end of this. So I agree with you. His arc is really interesting. And I wasn't personally prepared for all of the character development. I thought it was going to be just Eddie's journey throughout the whole thing, but every character in this is really dynamic. I particularly liked Amber's story about trying to reclaim her relationship with her son, and how Eddie represented that sort of part of her in the most fucked up possible way, seeing as they starred in movies together.
Yeah.
I enjoyed Roller Girl's arc of wanting to get her GED, and like all of these things are subtle and for all intents and purposes, relatively small storylines in terms of screen time, but you feel for these characters. You know what else it kind of reminds me of? both tonally and just like how it's shot is almost um
Almost Famous, yeah.
yeah, it like especially because you know in that movie you have the young reporter who's coming up and suddenly thrust into this world that is full of distinct pleasures about which he knows nothing, but that he can also make use of. Um, so it feels very much like that wide-eyed young boy entering this world that can offer him everything, but that he doesn't understand and could very easily eat him alive. I remember watching, you know, while watching Boogie Nights, I was like, it feels in some ways similar to Almost Famous. Like you have the Kate Hudson character in that movie. It's kind of similar to what Amber Waves serves in this one, where she looks out for the kid a little bit. And again, the relationship is very weird, and there's lots to unpack there. But I find that type of story interesting. It's a very fish out of water story, but this fish just has a huge dick.
It's you know, and we're jumping around here, but I do want to get to that because the last shot of the movie
Yep.
is Dirk has made amends with Jack and the rest of the, you know, kind of found family, and they're about to shoot another one in his series of like secret agent, you know, ladies man porno films. And so Dirk is sitting in his dressing room reciting a monologue into a mirror. And at the end of it, he stands back and pulls down his pants and whips out the giant schlong. And it just stands there or sits there. And he zips up his pants and turns and walks out, cut to black. I never, even though I love Boogie Nights, I always hated that last shot
I agree.
because it's part of the fun for me. And it's not that I'm imagining what it looks like or how big it is, but the way that the camera insinuates how big it is. Like there are scenes where, and pardon folks, but this is the technical term. Dirk gets a lot of blowjobs in this movie, and what's fun is the way that it's shot at a certain angle. Usually, when you see see one on camera, you see the guy and he's like got his head back, and you kind of go down his chest, and the girl's like in his lap. A lot of these scenes, you could see the girl's head like almost directly below his head.
Yep.
Like it's so long. And
It's almost farcical.
funny. Yes.
But I agree on this last shot. So I'm sure you're familiar with the theory of Chekhov's gun in storytelling, right? It's like,
Yes.
this is Chekhov's cock, you know, it's just what it is. Um, but, and I think that, you know, as with any storytelling technique, it is a guideline meant to inspire ways of storytelling rather than a fast and hard rule, as Dirk Diggler might say. Um, and in this case, I didn't want the gun to go off, right? I didn't need to see what he was packing, because the joy of the movie is his effect on other people often is a direct result of his penis, right? It's just this it's this massive influence. It is. And you see its effect, so you don't need to see it. And it felt a little ham-fisted at the end to kind of just like, all right, well, here we go, you know, end of movie. I would have rather just heard his monologue and seen him waltz off, you know, to continue whatever pursuit he's on. Like it doesn't um that said, it's not a movie ruiner. It's not like, you know, it's not some bomb that blows up the entire film. It's just like, damn, you could have gotten through the whole thing without this. And then like, you know, what purpose did it serve, I guess is my question.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal back in 97. I remember that because there wasn't a whole lot of, I mean, aside from like the Crying Game 5 years earlier, it was kind of unusual to see penises on screen, especially in a mainstream, even though it's an R-rated movie. So it was kind of like a shocking thing, like, oh my God. But now with everyone who's carrying Boogie Nights around in their pockets via the, you know, phones and internet and all that stuff, it kind of loses its shock value. So I think it's just one of those kind of you had to be there things. But even when I was 23 or whatever watching, I was like, I don't need that.
It's like seeing Gone with the Wind and realizing, oh, there's swears in this one. Like
I've never seen Gone with the Wind.
me neither. Oh God, don't add it to the list.
It's on my list. I actually have the Blu-ray. I just have not watched it. I got yeah, I have a standing date with someone to watch that for a show at some point. So that's neither here nor there. But yeah, the one of the other nice kind of parallel storylines that happens in this movie is the evolution of porn and how that kind of tracks from the heyday of the
Yeah.
1970s up through the 80s. Philip Baker Hall plays the I don't know if he's a producer or he's working with the Colonel, and during the New Year's Eve party at Jack's house, the thing that kind of sets the tonal shift that we're going to see with a murder. He has a meeting with Jack and the Colonel talking about the future is videotape.
He is the
And
guy that always looks and sounds like he has a cigar in his mouth, right? He always plays
yes,
like some mobster adjacent character. I know he's in
yes,
other stuff. I just can't think of it.
yeah, he's great. But he also brings to this party these four like acneed, slouched, greasy looking teenagers. And at one point he says, these kids are the future, Jack. And Jack wants no part of it because part of his vision is to make act. We don't get his backstory, but you kind of get it from inferring things based on what he does and what he says. You get the feeling he might have been a failed director. Like he always wanted to make legitimate films, but he got into porn probably for a lot of the reasons other people did at the time is because they, it was relatively cheap and easy and you could, make some money off of it, make a
Right.
living. But he sees himself as an artiste and he likes to shoot on film. He likes to edit on film and he thinks videotape is just, it's just going to be cheap. It's not going to be story based. And this guy, Philip Baker Hall's character, comes in with these kids off the street and says, look, anybody can be a porno star. Cut to 2022, and you don't really see porn like you did even, 10 or 20 years ago, like the story driven stuff. People aren't making like movies so much anymore as they are compilations of things. And it's like you could watch your neighbors get it on, for free on Pornhub or whatever. And it's just that downward trajectory of the porn industry, even though it ends in the early 80s when things were still going strong with the advent of VHS. Jack ended up kind of jumping on that bandwagon, but he was never quite the same. You get the sense.
Yeah, it's kind of lampooning something that again is very prevalent today and relevant. It's that this is a viable business. Not only that, but it's a viable job for people. And that battle, which I think was very well depicted here, especially in the move from cinema to on-demand video, like actual VHS tapes. That was very interesting because then I look now and I'm like, there is still such a stigma attached to any sort of sex-related work. And this movie feels prescient in that way. It's, it's commenting on the ways that technology makes these things more available and more accessible to literally everybody, but the stigma never goes away. So despite there being so much more access and so much more exposure, it is still looked down upon by so many. And it's like, well, if it has succeeded this long and, been on the cutting edge of technology, for lack of a better term, in so many ways, why do people still butt heads with it so much, and it kind of exposes the underbelly of people who are opposed to this type of thing, to porn in particular. It's like, well, if you don't watch it, you probably know a million people who do, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and if you don't watch it, you're probably a liar. So that's kind of like an interesting thought experiment that springs from a movie that was made in what, 1990?
97.
97.
Yeah.
I was close. but still, it's like, you think about that's one of the things I love about this series we do is I watch movies from however long ago, and this one isn't even that old, quote unquote, right? It's like
it's a quarter century, Cole.
Right. It's a quarter century, the turn of the century, Boogie Nights. But it's just like, oh, these films have ideas that are still so relevant today. In a way, it's disappointing because it's like, oh, we couldn't have figured this one out, moving forward. It's like porn and sex work is so universal. It feels like something we should all be able to agree on. Like, this is okay. Let's just kind of let it do its thing and have, sensible regulations surrounding it to protect the people who are doing it. But
well,
instead you have what Boogie Nights is doing.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, and we don't need to get into it, but we are on the, not by a large degree, but we are on the opposite side of that stance there. I don't, and again, it's a like everything else, it's a wide, nuanced argument. I'm not saying I have a problem with porn, but there's a lot of things kind of wrapped up with it. I don't necessarily think it's something that should be promoted as a viable lifestyle. And that goes for, sure, if you want to be in Hollywood or, making movies in Canoga Park or whatever, that's fine. But the allure of like cam girl culture, and I guess, are there even cam guys? Is that a thing?
I'm sure there is.
Because you always hear, is that sexist? I always hear about cam girls. What about the cam guys? Or maybe people just don't want to see
I know
guys
plenty
sitting
of
topless
guys
at their.
named Cam.
Ooh, there you go. But no, yeah, that's the thing is, and it's hard to tell because I kind of had my ears perked up while I was watching this because of the kind of drugs are bad messaging, that
Right.
I was wondering if there was some kind of a morality statement being pushed through this, or even like kind of flirting with it. I mean, Roller Girl nearly kills somebody and possibly did. There's a scene earlier in the film where she's in high school and there's a guy in the class who, they have a quiz and she's not prepared for it. And so she's kind of looking around the room. She sees a guy making an obscene gesture, and she freaks out and storms out. And then later, when they're doing kind of a precursor to the reality porn, she and Jack are driving around LA or whatever in a limo, looking to pick up someone to film them having sex with Roller Girl, just like a man on the street. And they happen to pick up the guy, the creep from her class, and he gets really overzealous. I mean, he's doing what everyone agreed was going to happen, but he gets really aggressive with it. And when everyone says, hey, stop, or calm down, or this isn't sexy, he gets completely indignant and insults Roller Girl, insults Jack, gets out of the car. He jumps out of the limo and starts beating this guy. And then Roller Girl, she gets out and she stomps this guy so relentlessly that
Yep.
there's a couple of cutaways. There's one cutaway to the guy when he's on the ground after Jack has gotten done pummeling him and his face is all bloody. When we see after Roller Girl does her thing, like 8, 9 times, stomping a guy's face with roller skates, we cut back. I'm pretty sure it's the same shot. I guarantee that guy's skull would have been jelly after that
Yeah.
part. But, there's no real consequence to that. There's no comment on it later on. I don't know if we're meant to believe that she got away with it, or did the guy quote unquote deserve it. It's almost like a dream interlude, because that happens at the same time. Going back to The Godfather, I know I'm rambling here, sorry, but the Godfather, towards the end of that, had that famous montage of all of the heads of the families getting whacked. And this one, you've got the montage of the Roller Girl attack. You've got Dirk getting beaten up because he essentially gets sort of oddly catfished into masturbating in front of a guy, and a whole bunch of other dudes show up and beat the shit out of him. And then you've got Buck Swope, the Don Cheadle character, going into a late night donut shop with his girlfriend. I can't remember if they were married at that point, but she's very pregnant, and she was one of the former, co-stars. They were trying to get out of porn together. Goes into a donut shop. It gets stuck up. A guy with a gun tries to save the day and ends up almost like a mouse trap Mexican standoff.
Yeah.
Like one gun goes off and then everybody ends up falling dead except for Don Cheadle's character. But it's a really violent, really disturbing kind of montage that it's like, okay, this is rock bottom for everybody.
Yeah. It's literally, it's kind of like a come to Jesus moment, it's everybody realizing, oh wait, like I think in each of those moments individually, everybody has already kind of talked about their ambitions beyond porn and beyond sex work, but they've never really considered them as like reasonable or very or like achievable goals. At least you don't get that sense from the movie. And then these terrible things happen in front of all of them, and they don't say it, but you can see it in their faces that they're thinking, okay, like when did I start on the track that got me here? And they kind of just like in an instant recall their entire journeys. And, then we get to a different montage at the end, which is kind of showing where every character ends up. And it's the immediate aftermath of like those thoughts. And obviously the aftermath of the actions they took in response to those thoughts. And I thought that was a really interesting storytelling technique. Like you know, we see them hit rock bottom, and we don't necessarily see them doing the work to climb back out, but we connect the dots because we see them somewhere else that isn't rock bottom.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a little veneer of hope to it, and I don't mind that in my movies. I like it if it's done well, and I think here it is.
Yeah, and you'll notice that the movie that they're going to shoot at the end is the Brock Landers movie with Dirk Diggler playing Brock Landers, the super detective or whatever. It's not
Yep.
Johnny Doe. And when Jack starts making the kind of career moves on this Johnny Doe kid, you don't get the feeling that he's trying to replace um Dirk because you're just the old model, we need some fresh talent. You get the feeling that he has to, because his main star is spiraling out of control. He's become like egotistical and high on dope all the time, and he can't perform. So yeah, at the end, sort of everything is reconciled. Now, I did jump kind of over after that montage. I think there's a title card of like One Last Thing or something, and that's the big botched drug deal with Todd and Dirk and John C. Reilly's character. Why can't I think of his name?
Reed.
Reed, yes, Reed Rothschild. They go to Alfred Molina's house because they hear he'll buy anything and pay like exorbitant amounts of cash for it. They decide, hey, we'll hustle him. We'll get like a brick of baking powder and we'll sell it to him for $5,000. And everyone's like, this is a dumb idea, but it might just work. They go in, it works. But then Todd says, I heard there's a floor safe in your bedroom and we're not leaving until we get that. And then it turns into the club scene from True Romance, with with only missing is Gary Oldman. It's a great scene, and that is rock bottom. You think you're at rock bottom, and then you find there's a cliff that next to the rock, and then the rock tumbles over.
Yep. And then RIP. And then everyone's okay. And to
Yeah.
some degree, I suppose, except for Todd, who gets shot by a shotgun in the stomach.
Oh, and then like we end as we began, with this long tracking shot going through Jack's house. In the beginning was going through the nightclub. At the end, we're going through the house, and we see a portrait, a painting of William H. Macy's character, Bill, who
Yeah.
was kind of like the production assistant or assistant director on a lot of Jack's films. And he blew his brains out on New Year's Eve 1980, when he found his wife, played by real adult film star Nina Hartley, engaged once again with degrading acts of sex in front, with people that were not him. He shot her paramour, and then blew his brains out right after the New Year's call. Hell of a way to announce the new decade and the shift in your movie.
Yep. Yeah. That was I guess that's the turning point. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, it's so after all is said and done, Boogie Nights, I think, is probably still my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie. And
For
revisiting
some of
it
his
now,
others.
oh my gosh, you're gonna make me do this. He did There Will Be Blood, he did The Master, Licorice Pizza, and P.T. Anderson fans out there are yelling at their screen right now because I'm not like getting others, but those are the ones that stick out. I mean, I really did not like The Master, but I think I need to watch it again. And I loved There Will Be Blood. That's a phenomenal movie with Daniel Day-Lewis giving an amazing performance. But this is, I think, the movie, and I haven't seen Licorice Pizza, but this is the movie that just screams like, this is life. It's romantic, it's harrowing, it's dark, and as you mentioned, it's hopeful. And I just wish there were more movies like this that that I could see.
That weren't part of a 20 movie franchise. You're still on your boycott though, aren't you?
Yes, I am, and I don't know if it's going to be temporary at this point. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from obviously experience that this is a market shift in our tone, I suppose. But I we started watching Ms. Marvel on Disney Plus, and we were like, I watched another video essay on Marvel, and this video essay was not very good, but it did make points that I enjoyed, and it was just like identifying the problems that this particular reviewer saw with the MCU, and I felt very much the same, whereas it started with all these amazing origin stories that you knew were tangentially connected and you had the time to invest. And in this one, it feels a little bit like they're floundering. It feels like we're just going to throw a million origin stories with no connectivity yet. And I just don't know if I have the buy-in, you know? It's like I may wait until a movie comes out that everybody says convinced them before I watch it. But yeah, I'm very interested in your boycott, and I still haven't seen Thor: Love and Thunder, for example. And I love Taika, so that says something in and of itself. But before we sign off, I did want to ask you about something unrelated to any of Boogie Nights, the MCU, but I'm sure you remember our wonderful episode about Nathan For You
Yes.
and Finding Francis. So I was talking with Erin the other day about Finding Francis, and she was like, we need to rewatch that. Like, that is God tier movie, content. And then I thought, I know I asked you via email if you would watch The Rehearsal, but I wanted to take a minute to offer my unabashed recommendation, both to you and to anybody listening here, of Nathan Fielder's The Rehearsal for HBO. It is insane. It will start off being everything it purports to be, and then it will devolve into the most mad Nathan Fielder madness you could ever expect. It is difficult to watch. It is glorious. It is insane, and it is funny. I don't want to spoil anything, but holy shit, is it?
Well, it's on HBO HBO Plus or HBO Max.
HBO
right?
Max. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is a sneak preview for what's coming up in October, but Cole, I think that we are going to finally, because we are, as our president would say, out of the pandemic, we're going to get together and watch a movie together, which we have not done in years.
I can't remember the last one we did.
I'd have to go back in the archives and figure it out, but it was before, it was when we were still doing like audio stuff, right?
Yep.
So yeah, we'll have to figure something out, because next month we're going to be talking about Stephen King's Misery for Page to Screen, and I'm excited about that. But yeah, and I think I'm going to muscle my way over to your house to watch it, and you can show me some of this Rehearsal.
Oh man, you loved Finding Francis from what I remember.
Oh yeah.
This is like Finding Francis on crack. It is a cut above. Yeah, it is. I can't even, I'm speechless.
I hope you're not overselling it, because Nathan For You and Finding Francis, like, I still have not watched all of Nathan For You. It's one of those things where I know it was a thing, and I watched a handful of the episodes, some of them with you.
Right.
But because there's a finite number, I kind of want to save them,
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So I do not want to oversell The Rehearsal. It is decidedly different than Finding Francis, but you watch it and you think this is everything Nathan Fielder was meant to create. But what's interesting about this, whereas, I don't think Finding Francis crossed all that many lines, it was within his formula. The Rehearsal crosses the lines and then asks, why do you cross them? When are you supposed to? Should you ever? It's remarkable, and it feels like a document more so than just a show. So I'm very excited for you to watch it. Ever since I saw it, I was like, Ian needs to get his hands on this.
Well, I shall. And again, I like your choice of words as we're ending our conversation about Boogie Nights. So yeah, thank you, Cole. Cole, what are you up to lately? Where can people find your stuff? Like, what do you want to promote? What are you most proud of that you've done lately?
I love all my work for Tor.com. You can find me there. I write all sorts of stuff about sci-fi and fantasy books and movies and such. In fact, a lot of the discussions that we have will often worm their way in one way or another to my articles, because it's always an exploration of the concepts that make the genre of sci-fi and fantasy great. I also still write for The Quill to Live. My book reviews are there. And if you're into sports betting, you can find my Bears betting previews at Forbes Betting. And that's a proud byline I have. So I'm excited about that one.
You're writing for Forbes, man. I mean, that's crazy.
Pretty sick. And they're letting me cover the Bears, which is, if you know how little I know about sports, you would feel the same way about it that I do, which is trepidatious, but mildly excited.
So are you going to the games, or are you just kind of covering
No, it is
stats and
betting previews, so talking about the narrative of the game and recommending bets and stuff. And I do know plenty enough about the Bears for that to be a viable option for me. Yeah, if they were trying to send me to the sidelines, I would go, because how cool is that? But also I would feel extraordinarily out of my depth.
which, you know, you could turn into a fantastic series of pieces.
There we go.
Yeah.
A Bears fan on the sidelines.
Yeah. All right, sir. Well, thank you very much for talking Boogie Nights. I'm glad you liked it. I wasn't quite sure what your reaction would be.
Well, that anticipation's part of the fun of this show, honestly.
Yes, I'm glad you didn't hate it.
I told
But
oh wait, sorry, I have one last tiny thing.
yeah.
I have a friend at the Quill to Live named Alex who really loves your work. And he watches every episode that we do together, I know, and probably
Hey,
some of
Alex,
the
thank
other
you.
stuff that you do. And he he connects with and jives with your opinions very often. And this makes sense to me. You've never met him, but he's a very analytical and critical thinker on media, and he loves to kind of like unpack and dive into to movies and stuff. And he says that for the most part, he agrees with the opinions that you set forth. And then I told him that you liked Eternals. And he goes, "Oh no."
There's at least got to be one. I can't.
I know, right? So we all got a good laugh out of that one. But shout out to Alex for listening.
Yes, thank you, Alex. And I'm sorry.
Yeah, his exact quote, "Oh no."
Well, and here's the thing. I do want to correct the record. Alex, I don't want you to walk away from thinking that I do like the Eternals. I don't. I love the Eternals. Yeah. Anyway,
I'm gonna need a month-long break. I'll see you in October.
well, at least you're still committed to hanging out with me in October to talk misery. That's a good sign. All right, Cole. Thanks a lot, and yeah, we'll catch you later.
Fairly well. Catch you next time.
Bye.